Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Crowd Chatter Podcast. And today is going to be conference tournament picks. Now, I don't remember what year we did this, but we actually picked the conference tournaments and like what we thought would take place, who we think would win it. And I'm going to do that again this year. And as you can see, we are starting with the ACC tournament. This is a big one for a lot of bubble teams. That's really the main reason I think we did it, was that we can go over and see how far the bubble teams will go. Um, so obviously for Stravinsky, I'm sure he's very interested to see what I do with the Syracuse Orange. Um, but for the ACC, let's just get this one started. We got a lot to go over here. Obviously, I'm gonna do the Power Six, so ACC, Big 12, Big East, Big 10, Pac 12, SEC. I don't know why I blanked out on those last ones. But we're going to start with the ACC here. So, first one, we're going to start with the first round, obviously, and keep moving on. Well, actually, you know what? That's not how I'm actually going to do it. I'm going to move around the board, and you can see like all the teams where they're seated, and I'll kind of go over like what the teams need, what some teams need to do, what other teams don't need to do. And that's kind of be like a brief overview of the season for the conference. Now, yeah, I'll do that. You know what? That's a good idea. Well, for the ACC, if you're a team in the top half of this conference, things are looking pretty good for you. You're doing pretty well. If you're in the top half, you gotta be pretty excited. At least for most teams. Some teams maybe are still in a little bit of desperation mode. Um, but if you're in the top half, you should be feeling pretty good about yourself. If you're in the bottom half, in the top half, you're all looking at a chance at a tournament bid. Um, but if you're in the bottom half, you have absolutely no chance at the tournament. So once again, as weirdly has been for the past few years, the last couple of years for the ACC, there's just a clear talent gap. I mean, you have a clear top of the conference with teams like you can see Miami, Florida having an outstanding season. Virginia had a good year again, shocker. Uh, Duke, even though they were kind of disappointing, still did okay. And really, other than that, there's not really a clear cut great team out of the ACC. I mean, even Clemson, who is a 3 seed, and was a 3 seed from the ACC, they're a 14-6 team in the conference, and they're right on the cut line. It just it's crazy stuff out of the ACC that you can be as good as 14-6 and still be a question mark. NC State, they're not locked for the tournament yet. North Carolina obviously is directly on the bubble. Pitt Panthers, they have a good conference record and they're on the bubble. And of course, after that, there's really nobody else who are really in the conversation. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Q's. You're not in the conversation. And then anything past Wake Forest is really considered just a really bad loss. So the ACC, it's been a struggle bus for this conference. But as I said, we're just gonna go right into this video and get things started. So our first game, we have Florida State and Georgia Tech. Both of these teams, obviously, as you can see by the records, did not have the greatest seasons. Florida State actually did. Actually, there were a 7-13 conference team. So you can see what their record is. They only have 2 non-conference wins. They have not been good. Georgia Tech has a better record. And I mean, I guess, maybe have some better wins. It's a complete toss-up because Florida State, while they've been a bit better in the ACC and have actually beaten a couple decent teams, they've also lost pretty badly to some pretty bad teams. So, I think this is anybody's game, but I'm going with the team that has the better record. Give me Georgia Tech to move on to take on the Pitt Panthers. And I'll update the record because, it's another win for them. So they're now at 15 and 17. Uh, but I'll have Georgia Tech moving on to take on the Pitt Panthers in the second round. And as not a game Pitt can lose. Louisville and Boston College are the other game here. Now, I'm not really going to even mention why I am. Well, I'm not even going to talk about this game because if you can see by Louisville's record, and I'm talking about this number right there. You might not be able to see it now, but that number. You can see that they're winning. That winning number, that first number is a single digit, and it's not a high single digit. It's a low single digit. Yeah, so I'm taking Boston College. Neither of these teams are any good, but Boston College is not 4-27. In fact, they're only a win away from being above 500. So, yeah, I am taking Boston College to move on to take North Carolina. Once again, not a game the Tar Heels can lose. Then we go to the last game of the first round for the ACC, which is Notre Dame and Virginia Tech. This is a big game for for I guess Virginia Tech. I mean, they're an 18 and 13 team, and you would think, wow, that's not terrible. They might have a chance at the tournament. Well, their conference record is like 7-11 or something not good. It was like 8-12 or something like that. Might even be lower. So, yeah, their conference record is just not good, which is really why they're here because they were doing well until that point. They had a pretty bad stretch in the ACC where they lost a ton of games. They looked like they're going to break out of it, and then they went right back into it. So that really has killed Virginia Tech. But Notre Dame's not a good team. I think Notre Dame might be motivated. I think Notre Dame will be motivated because Mike Bray, their head coach, is for now. He is still going to retire after the season. I'm sure those players are going to do whatever they can to have their head coach go out on a high note. And, that will have to entail going through Virginia Tech. As for the Hokies, I mean, I could take either one of these teams. Um, and really, like I said, all these teams, you lose to any of them, I think you're in a pretty bad position. But considering Notre Dame has only had 3 wins in the ACC, with one of them recently coming to the against the Pitt Panthers, they're just not good. So I'm taking Virginia Tech to get the win and move on and get to the next round to take on NC State, which brings us to the next round of the ACC, of where the only 2 teams that didn't play in the first round, which already had a matchup determined, Wake Forest and Syracuse will be the first game of the day. It goes from the top to the bottom. So all these games will start first, and then they'll continue down, going from there. So Wake Forest and Syracuse. Both Wake Forest was on Bubble Watch for a while, but a couple losses bumped them out. And now they're 500 in the ACC. They don't really have a ton of big wins. They actually in their last game just lost to Syracuse. And they also got bombed by NC State. They lost to Boston College. So, their February hasn't really had much of anything to go with. As for Syracuse, they're also not a team that has any shot at an at-large bid anymore after a pretty bad loss to Georgia Tech. After getting hammered by Pitt. Well, they got hammered. They have 3 straight games where they got absolutely hammered by opponents until they finally get a win at home against Wake Forest. So Syracuse would pretty much have to win the ACC tournament to keep their season going. Whether or not they win this game, even I'd say is a complete 50-50. I've watched Syracuse this year. They're a struggle bus, but then again, so was Wake. I mean, they just came off a loss to Boston College, so it's really hard to pick either one of these teams. But for Sabensky's sake, I'll take Syracuse. I'll have him move on one game, just one game, one game. I'll have him go. I'll have him go for one more round, one more round for them. Georgia Tech now will take in the next one. Georgia Tech will take on the Pitt Panthers in a game of which the Panthers can't lose. The Pitt Panthers, they desperately need to win this game. They have no margin for error as they just came up short against Miami, Florida in the last game of the year. They desperately needed that one. They didn't get it. So they need to win this game. I think Georgia Tech is going to give them all they can handle, but Pitt Panthers move on. Once again, they're the better team, and I think Pitt gets the win here, and they move on. As for this one, Boston College and North Carolina. This is another obviously big one for another bubble team. Boston College has actually weirdly been decent this year. They have a couple strangely good wins. I've also had some bad ones too, but they got a win at home against Virginia. They have that season sweep over Virginia Tech. They have a couple other wins as well. They nearly beat Duke at home. They beat Clemson at home. So Boston College, they're at 500. They have some bad non-conference losses. And yeah, they have some really bad non-conference losses. So they're a team that's going to have to pretty much win the ACC tournament to have a chance. North Carolina needs it as badly as they do. North Carolina has been wildly inconsistent, but I think there's even when they're not even that great, I think North Carolina is still better than Boston College. I think the Tar Heels get the win here, and they go on to take on Virginia. In this one, we have Virginia Tech taking on NC State. Now, Virginia Tech, they had a nice stretch where they were playing pretty well, and then they struggled, had a couple, and then they had a really bad stretch in January where they could not buy a win. And finally, they got one when they beat the Duke Blue Devils at home. Then they would end up beating Syracuse, but then would lose to Miami. They ended up beating Virginia. They're obviously a huge rival, but then they took another loss to Boston College. Would also lose to Georgia Tech, which obviously hurt. I think Virginia Tech is still in a decent spot. NC State, they're a decent team. Do I think NC State is great? Honestly, not really. I think they're a decent team, and they'll obviously be looking to win this one. But this is where I'm taking out an upset. I think Virginia Tech, even at nine, I mean, I think even at an 11 seed and even at that low, I think NC State's in trouble. Virginia Tech, they had a obviously struggle some stretch there in January, but this is a better team than I think most people think. Virginia Tech, and they always make a run in the ACC tournament, so I think this is a big opportunity for Virginia Tech. I say they get the upset over NC State, get a big win, move on to take on the Clemson Tigers, who are obviously looking for NC State because Virginia Tech will not do much for them in a game. So that obviously will hurt the Tigers, but it is what it is. for them. And then we go to the quarterfinals, which will start with the Syracuse Orange taking on the Miami Hurricane, taking on the Hurricanes of Miami, Florida. Yeah, I hate to burst Sorbensky's bubble and Q's fans' bubbles, but Miami's winning this one. They're fantastic. They're a pretty darn good team. I don't think they're necessarily great, but they played pretty well, and they're better than Syracuse. So I have Miami moving on. Excuse me. And then we have the Pitt Panthers taking on the Duke Blue Devils. This is an interesting one because Duke, I think, Duke is very capable of at their. I mean, if they're at their best, they will beat anybody. I don't think there is a team in the country that Duke at their best can beat. I don't think that if Duke plays their best game, if everybody's on and everybody's playing well, Duke at its best can beat absolutely anyone in the country, and there's not a doubt in my mind they can do that. But the biggest problem for them is they're not consistent. And, that's something for a lot of teams. But for the Duke Blue Devils, I mean, they were fantastic at home. They could not lose to anybody when they were at home. But, they go on the road. They have some struggles. They take some losses to some bad teams on the road. And end up losing to some not so great teams on the road as well. They have some good non-conference wins though, beating Iowa, beating Xavier. So Duke has got a good resume. They have obviously a pretty darn good team. The question I think now for Duke is, can they put it all together at the same time? Because it always seems like one guy for Duke does really well and the rest kind of struggle, or almost nobody does well and they all really struggle. So my question for Duke is, can they really put a full game together? Can they have everybody play, at the top of their game at the same time? If they do, good luck. But I think because Duke has not found that all year this year and have kind of skated by everybody the entire time. Pitt is on life support and has to win to move on. I think Pitt does. I think Pitt gets the win here. And I think the Pitt Panthers, they get the better of the Duke Blue Devils in a close one. Getting that win to possibly keep them in the tournament and going to the semis to take on Miami. We go to the bottom here, and we have North Carolina against Virginia. North Carolina, they have to win this game if they want to go to the tournament. They have no other choice. If they lose this game, then they're done. And so, if you're North Carolina, they have to win this game. And so I think if you're the Tar Heels, there's no other option. But as I said, it's Virginia. Virginia, I mean, I don't like Virginia's team necessarily. I think they're they're a decent team, but North Carolina, this is too inconsistent. And they haven't even played well lately. So, the Tar Heels, I want to pick North Carolina, and I'd love to see them move on. Because actually, I don't mind North Carolina. I kind of like them. But they have not played well. They have really struggled towards the end of this season. I mean, you saw even against Duke when they were at home, they had so many opportunities to win that game, and they missed every single one of them. So, that doesn't help them. Now they got that win against Virginia earlier when they were playing at home, which I mean that's nice, but you need you needed that game against Duke, and they didn't get that win, and so I think for North Carolina, if they don't beat Virginia, their tournament hopes are over. and this is a must-win. And I think Virginia wins it. North Carolina, like I said, they haven't played well. Pete Nance was supposed to be a replacement for Brady Manick. He hasn't been that. Caleb Love and RJ Davis have kind of been what they've been the entire time, which is either really good or really bad. There's no in between for those two. And, Leaky Black has just kind of been there. And Armando Baycott is good, but it hasn't really worked for North Carolina this year. They've struggled, and the late return has not been there for North Carolina. That late run hasn't happened. Maybe it'll happen in the ACC tournament, but we haven't seen it yet. So North Carolina, I'm picking UVA to get the win here. Coming out the other side, we have Virginia Tech. After getting the upset over NC State, they will take on the Clemson Tigers, who are also on life support. I think this is another big game. This is a huge one for Clemson. They cannot lose this game. They really have to win to keep their season alive, to have a hope at still going to the NCAA tournament. And you look at Clemson, they have some solid players. They played pretty well. I think Virginia Tech, I think this is anybody's game. I think this can go either way. And I would not be surprised if it's Virginia Tech who gets the win, but I am going to take Clemson by a slight margin. I think the Clemson Tigers, they're fighting for their tournament hopes. Virginia Tech is looking to steal another bid, as they did last year. But I think Clemson just barely gets away with the win and moves on to the next round to take on the Virginia Cavaliers in the semifinal. And then we have, of course, the semifinals for the ACC tournament here. And we start with Pitt taking on Miami, Florida. They were close last time. Pitt could be. I'm not really. I don't really know much about Miami. I think Miami, Florida wins this one. I don't really know a whole lot about Miami, but Pitt is an okay team, but Miami has been pretty good, darn good this season. So I'm going with the Hurricanes to get the win. Probably a close one, kind of like the last one was. They will face each other not that long ago, but I think Miami gets the win and moves on. And then you got Clemson taking on Virginia. Now, Clemson's not really a defensive team, and Virginia, they are obviously very good when it comes to defense. So, I'm taking Virginia in this one. I think Virginia's has got the advantage. They're a good defensive team, and Clemson just struggles defensively. And so, with that in mind, I'm taking the Hokies to get the win. Move on to the ACC Conference Championship for the tournament to take on Miami, Florida. Now, this should be a fun game. But I'm still going with Virginia. This team, as much as I don't like their style of play, and it really, to me, it's like, yeah, I don't get how they keep winning. It works. They're, even though I hate the defensive style of play, it does work. It is Tony Bennett teams are always tough, and they might not be great offensively, but they will always, and I mean always, suffocate you on the offensive end, and it makes it so hard to score on any Virginia team. So it is very impressive for the Cavaliers, what they've been able to do with Tony Bennett. But I am taking Virginia to win the ACC tournament, and they are the ones who will end up with the automatic bid. Not that they need it. But that's it for this video. That's it for the ACC. Obviously, I got a lot more tournaments to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And I will see you in the next one. So until next time, adios, everyone.